Joining us this morning is George Knapp, a familiar face, of course, with Channel 8, and we're here to talk Area 51, a subject of which you're slightly well-versed. It's been 30 years since Channel 8 first broadcast the first documentation reference to Area 51. Talk about that. How did it all go down back then?
It was a Monday afternoon. I was the co-anchor of the 5 o'clock news with Paula Francis, and each day in those newscasts, we would have a 5-minute segment where we did a live interview with somebody.
With someone.
It might be James Brown, it might be George Carlin, it might be an FBI agent, somebody interesting. And our interview that day canceled on us at the last minute. And I'd been hearing about this guy, Bob Lazar, even though I didn't know his name, a guy who was a friend of John Lear's who worked out at Area 51 on really strange stuff, supposedly on saucers. I called up Lear at the last minute. Can your guy come and talk to us? He says, I'll get back to you. And sure enough, he did. But he wanted his face and identity blocked out. So we did an interview with a guy named Dennis. Paul and I had no idea at the time what he was going to say. And out comes this story spilling out. And it changed the trajectory of my professional life, certainly changed his life, and changed Area 51 forever, put it on the map.
Well, let's just talk about what he said in that interview. What was it that was so groundbreaking at that time? Because at that point, no one knew about Area. We all think of Area 51 as this thing that we acknowledge, but back then that was totally new.
Yeah, the only people who knew about Area 51 back then either lived in Nevada, lived around the base, or had worked there. I mean, outside of that, few people around the world didn't knew about it. But this was very dramatic. Bob Lazar said he'd been hired by the U.S. Navy through EG&G to work at a facility called S4, which is adjacent to Papoose Dry Lake, built into the side of the mountain, disguised to look like the mountain, and inside that mountain was a series of hangars, and inside the hangars were 9 flying discs, flying craft. We weren't building them to figure out how to fly them, we were taking apart to figure out how they worked, reverse engineering this technology that was far in advance of anything we had. So it was wild.
And you and Paul are sitting there, your jaws are on the floor. This was completely new to you.
Absolutely new to us, and I know as soon as the interview is over, the general manager comes rushing into the news director, Bob Stoddall. They're going, is that for real? We figured right then, if it were real, if it were true, we needed to find out. So we started our project.
I was going to say, so you do the interview 30 years ago. What happens after that?
Well, that started our investigation, and we decided to find out who Bob Lazar was. We wanted to look for other witnesses who might be able to give us bits and pieces of the same story, and we found them. And if it had just been Lazar, probably that would have ended right there. We'd never have heard about it, well, but we certainly have heard plenty about it since then.
Yeah. So what do we know about Area 51 now? And I guess what is happening there that we know of?
Area 51 is an amazing place. I mean, men and women who have toiled out there in obscurity for so many years couldn't even tell their own spouses what they were doing. That is where the Cold War was won. They've been on the cutting edge of technology forever, and right now I think they're working on some really interesting stuff. An invisible plane, drones of all kinds, fire planes that don't need pilots, amazing technology as always.
So what are we going to be talking about for Channel 8? Let's talk quickly about some of the reports you've got coming up on Area 51.
Well, we're going to revisit Bob Lazar, that first interview, the Dennis interview, what was going through his mind as he got set up for that. We're going to look at all the 1,000 consumer products and books and movies that have been launched because of that project, and then compare what Bob Lazar said he saw to some of the new revelations about UFO technology being investigated by the Pentagon.
Interesting stuff. Good to see you again,
Sure.
George.
You too.
I could talk to George for hours. Again, the I-Team's chief investigator, George Knapp, has several different stories about the discovery of Area 51, and that first interview with Bob Lazar tonight is during our 5, 6, and 11 o'clock newscasts. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have had the Las Vegas 51s, all sorts of stuff.